Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this two-part series, Jack Schonely, Tony Webber, and I sit back down for a full-length interview with LA County Fire Pilot and 2024 HAI Pilot of the Year Award recipient, Mike Sagely. In this engaging conversation, we cover a wide range of topics, from the profound impact a career in aviation can have on family life and mental health, to the importance of mentorship and preparation for success. Join us as Mike shares his journey from serving as an Army pilot during a pivotal time in history to navigating the challenges of modern aviation. He reflects on the transition from the Vietnam War era to flying iconic helicopters like the Blackhawk and Apache, and discusses his selection process for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, along with the rigorous training and deployments that defined his military career. We also delve into the realities faced by military and public safety personnel in maintaining strong family units amidst the demands of the roles and stresses of the job. Mike provides invaluable insights on transitioning from service to civilian life and working as a pilot for the LA County Fire Department, detailing the diverse missions they undertake, including rescues and firefighting operations. We wrap up with a compelling discussion on the critical importance of aircraft maintenance in firefighting and the strategic role of helitech crews. Mike concludes with advice for aspiring aviators, emphasizing the values and integrity, reputation, and professional training. Thank you to our sponsors, Garmin, Technisonic, and Dallas Avionics.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Think back, all four of us sitting here looking at each other on the screen. Think back to when you started your career with your friends and how many of them did not make it marriage-wise. And I could, there's a lot.
Majority.
Yeah. It's just a rough job. Military, law enforcement, it doesn't matter. The divorce rate is high because things happen. I mean, and a lot of it is being gone, shift work. Yeah. For Mike, it's being gone a long time, for months at a time. And, you know, the sad thing is not everybody survives that.
No, I think though, you know, the other part, I think she's part of it. Just sometimes she's okay with me. I think she likes when I'm gone. Especially now on the fire side, because it's only 24 hours at a time. And then I come home, or maybe I might do 48 or something like that. But for the most part, but you know, just in the last 11 years of my career, I did 9 deployments to Bosnia, 9 to Iraq, and 3 to Afghanistan, and 1 to another place undisclosed. But that didn't include training, CONUS trips, everything in between. That's a lot. I mean, that's almost unreasonable, you know, in the request. And the kids, you know, and it's the kids. We haven't even talked about the kids, but I chose to do it. She knew that I wanted to go where I eventually ended up, and it was where I needed to be, in all honesty. Really, I think I'd finally hit sort of the pay dirt, if you will, and finding the Shangri-La of the people and the focus, the mission, everything about it. So I don't have any regrets. I hope she doesn't. She probably does. But.
John, you have some experience in this. You won the lottery too. Yeah. Talk about your angle in this, John.
Yeah. I mean, my wife has been through thick and thin with me in the career, and as has every other spouse that we talk about in public safety and the military communities. But she's been a rock star through all of it, you know, missing holidays, birthday parties, random events that you shouldn't have to miss, but we do. And that's, you know, she understood that, and it's wearing. I know that, and she knows that. But I think for me, if I was to give some advice to younger folks who are newly into the career or newly married in their career, one would be to try and be understanding of that, to recognize the impact that your career and your career choices has on your spouse,
Yeah.
To understand what you guys have all talked about, there's ups and downs, and through the downs, it doesn't mean that it doesn't get better, because it does. We've all seen that. We've all been through the ups and downs, but it's something you got to fight for. You can't just let it happen.
Yeah.
The last part of that is, I remember my mom forever when I was a kid, and as I started dating my wife and I started dating when we were in high school, she'd always talk about how important it is to communicate to your spouse. And I remember like kind of rolling my eyes when she'd say that, because you're a kid and you're just like, you hear your mom nag on you on this stuff all the time. And I fast forward to my early part of my fire career when I worked for the U.S. Forest Service. We were out on a fire, a campaign fire. And at the time, all you had was payphones. So you'd line up at the payphone on a campaign fire, and you'd get 5 minutes to talk to she was my girlfriend at the time. And that's all you got, and Mike, I know yours was much different. You didn't get to talk at all, but it'd be that one phone call during a 2-week period. And it was tough because you couldn't communicate. Going back to what my mom said. Yeah. Fast forward to today, and everybody has a cell phone in their hand. Yeah. Everybody has the ability to text their wife and say, or husband, I'm fine. I'm doing this, or I'm doing that.
Much different.
Or, hey, I just got a call. I'm going to be late tonight, or late this morning, whatever shift you're on. So I now looking back, my mom's 100% right. Communication to me is one of the keys of a successful marriage. So Mom, you're right. So I just encourage people to be transparent with their spouses and to communicate. But
good.
Yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents. But this kind of lends into the larger picture that we've all talked about. We talked about it offline a little bit. Mental health that goes into the life outside of the career. You kind of, I can see through the operational tempo that Mike, you were a part of in the special operations community. You're always gone. You're exposed to, a lot of elements. And if you're in a position where you don't have that significant other to help kind of unpack a lot of this stuff, you're kind of shouldered with a lot of this burden. So looking back again for you, Mike, on the course of your career, mental health has come a long ways in this kind of short amount of time. I think just in my 20 years in law enforcement, it seems like it grew by leaps and bounds. What's your outlook on, kind of mental health as it pertains to the military?
I think there's a couple of things there that are interesting. I don't think it really matters. It probably does matter, the intensity aspect of it, but in the military, the relationships and the experiences that you have with people are just, they're so much different, especially if you're deployed in combat in the last many, many, many years of global war on terror and such. And I spent more time and knew probably more about the guys that I worked with and lived with when I was gone than I did my family at the time, my wife, even for that matter. Our first, 15 years of our marriage, I spent so much time away from her. We didn't really grow together. And in some ways we probably grew apart. So you develop these relationships with these other soldiers, these friends, and you have a bond and a connection, and it's almost a I don't know how to explain this. Like you almost can't, it's a coexistence. It's almost like you can't function without them. And the intensity of your job and the things that you're doing and the world that you're living in. And it's simple. It's much more simple. Here's what you're doing today. This is your mission. Go out and execute. You go home and it's like screaming kids, and it's life, and it's bills, and it's 40 different cereals, and it's all this crazy, crap. So you become almost like this different person, and you become a part of these other people. And that doesn't include the very traumatic experiences where maybe one of your close friends is killed or injured very badly, or anything like that. I'm just talking about in general as the human. And then when that goes away, to me, it's a huge shock. It's a big impact on you. I was relatively focused when I first retired because I had to start a new career, and I wanted to get on this new career. I wanted to get on the fire side. I wanted to get to LA County and so on and so forth. So up until I got up to LA County, which took about 2.5 years, I seemed to be okay. I was, pretty focused and wasn't really missing, that part I sort of tucked away in my mind, and all of a sudden when I hit that final goal, man, it really walked up on me, and it walked up on me for a variety of ways. And I had to start doing all these things that I didn't know what the hell I was doing with and I wasn't very good at. And one was being a husband, and 2 was being a dad, and 3 was dealing with regular people, let's say, that are less than impressive. So I like to call it post-traumatic separation disorder, meaning you're away from that place where you feel right about who you are, what you are, and who you're with. And I hear that a lot with soldiers. I hear that a lot with operators that spent a long time in the community, and now they're out on the kind of the regular world trying to make their way, and they're clearly seriously impressive and just dominating people. I mean, they just can do anything that they want to do, and they're going to be successful at it. But there's not too many things out there that can match what you were doing and where you came from. I kind of equate it to like the movie star who was super famous, and all of a sudden you're nobody, and they're on drugs, and they're alcoholics, and they're all this and that. And I was like, what's wrong with you? You're famous, you're wealthy, all these things. That part of their world goes away. And the human brain, I think the soul kind of has trouble sort of, dealing with that or transitioning from that. Not everybody, but most people at some level. I was very fortunate, we didn't have any real traumatic events where I went to a lot of funerals, but they weren't close people to me. We came out pretty good those first 6 or 7 years of the war for the most part. But I was no longer who I was. And I'm always that person. I don't want to say I was, I want to say I am. And now I was and I didn't like it. And it made me feel, just made me feel less of a man, I guess. I don't know. Not that's.
Did you feel like you kind of lost some of your identity? Would that be a good phrase?
I did. I lost that. I lost that identity of who I was. I didn't have my friends around me. Everybody was back east. I'm making all new friends, new people,
right,
new acquaintances, new career, new everything. And there were great people. I'm not saying I didn't, meet great people, but I was so identified in my soul of who I was and what I was, and that now it was gone, and I'm like just a regular person, and I didn't like it. So then, I guess a little more to the story in that where I see myself now is I kind of tried to sort of make that again. I want to become a good fighter pilot. I want to make an impact on the unit. I will develop these relationships with all the other agencies and the people in it. And I think I've done that along the way. It satisfies me now. It didn't satisfy me at the time. It was not comparable. It was not, I felt like I was not living up to what I was capable of. The government spent a lot of money for me to be able to do a whole lot of stuff, and I was using about 40% of it. And I felt bad about that. I felt guilty about that, actually.
Do you fear that could happen again in retirement, or is retirement when it comes? And I'm not saying it's coming soon, Mike. I'm just saying it's coming. Is there a fear that it'll happen again, or is it different? Will it be different this time because it's like retirement?
I think it'll be a little less impactful. It's always there. My mind, in my mind, I'm thinking, I could go back there and I could do that stuff just like I did. And I can't. I'm not physically the same. I might be a little smarter in some ways, but I don't have the skill set, that I had 15 years ago when I left the military. I mean, I was peaked. It was absolutely peaked. Yeah. And that's the part that bothers me a little bit is I've had a lot of people tell me I should have stayed. I left too early. Well, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't, leave at that time. But I really was peaked in my abilities flying airplanes and helicopters and just like doing everything. And I think pretty damn good at it. So walking away from it completely, my soul will still be there. I'll still have those memories. I'll still have that sort of feeling of this is what I was, this is what I accomplished through my career. But I think it'll be easier because I know that I can't go back.
Yeah.
The biggest part initially was knowing that I still could go back. I still was capable of being what I was when I walked out the door, but I wasn't doing it.
Yeah. That makes a big difference. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So that bothered me quite a bit. I went to, you were talking about going, talk to people, the Army or the military, the VA puts you up with, I think they call them social workers or whatever, basically a counselor. That was, I'm like, oh, well, you're just an adrenaline junkie. What? Or,
oh, wow.
Well, I can't tell you what to do. Or, just all this silly stuff. And I'm like, this is not doing anything for me. I know who I am. I know what I am. What I need to know is what can I do to sort of curtail it? And the answer to that really is there's not a lot other than just immersing yourself in either your job or your hobbies or your family and things of that nature. Really, realistically, what it should have been was my family, and it wasn't. It was a part of it, but it wasn't, and that's what it should have been. And I really regret that. I've got a lot of guilt, a lot of misgivings about how I handled that, how I basically pretty much almost ruined my family, my life, collectively. And it wasn't because, it was a mental case. I allowed myself to just sort of stay in that hole and kind of woe is me. And, this isn't good enough. And I don't like who I am because I'm not that quote superhero person I thought I was, and with all that crap in between. And I just had to sort of work my way, out of it and realize that there's still some good things ahead that I can, be very pleased with in accomplishing. And my next phase is really going to be about being a grandpa and trying to figure out, those few things that I want to do to keep me busy and interested.
Sure. Going back to the similarities we have again in our communities, you talk about folks retiring from law enforcement and public safety in general. They talk about the same thing. You're kind of in a loss of identity. And I've heard people liken it to professional athletes retiring from their sport of choice or the sport they played. You walk away from it and you've lost who you are and everything you dedicated yourself to. So it becomes hard then to kind of find the new thing, that the new mission. So I don't know what your experience, Jack, has been, but for me, the podcast has been amazing to stay connected to the community because you talk about the relationships you make, Mike, throughout the course of your career. That's really, it's about the person to the left and right of you,
It's everything. It's everything.
They're important relationships, and to stay connected for me has been huge. It's been a big part of my retirement, retirement success. Jack, for you, what's your experience been?
Well, I was worried about it because I knew people that retired and they went into a slump, and they were like in this other world of where they weren't happy. And so I knew that I had to keep busy, and I had heard that from many, many people, and the teaching kept me busy. The class kept me busy. Taking that, I didn't anticipate teaching at the academy, but it happened, and I'm thankful for it. I mean, I'm still in, you still have your hand, you're still in the game a little bit. You're not in the game, but you're coaching it, kind of thing, and teaching people tactics and talking about different things. And then certainly the podcast has been wonderful these past few months, just meeting a lot of different people, some of whom I knew and reconnected with, others that I didn't know. So the key is to find something in retirement that will keep you busy. And then on top of that, I got 5 grandsons, and they are wonderful. And that's a whole nother element, that's involved in it, and being as involved as we possibly can with them. So it's just a matter of keeping busy. And I haven't experienced any negatives in that, or looking back and going, man, I wish I would have stayed longer. No. It was good timing for where I was and the department I was with and all that stuff.
I think one of the things that we should touch on also is Jack and John. One of you left on your own terms, and then you've got John, who, you have something go on and you kind of are not leaving on your own terms. I think that adds a wrinkle to it too. I mean, would you agree to that?
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details.
Yeah, so I had 2 neck surgeries, and after my second neck surgery, couldn't essentially get a medical again. Yeah. So ability to fly disappeared, and it was not of my own choosing. Being put in a position where it's out of your control is difficult in one sense, but Mike, you brought up something in another sense. It's kind of different because, I'm not in a position where I could be doing this, but I'm not. I'm in a position I can't do it. And it kind of forces you to make this life change that you have no control over. And while it's difficult, it's not something you want. It's something you ultimately have to accept as I don't have a choice, Yeah. So for that side of it, for me, that's been hard to process initially. And now it's like, okay, it is what it is. I can't control that. It's not a personal decision. It's just something that it is, For folks that find themselves in that position, I know it's difficult. And, when you get to the point where you can process that and understand it, it's a lot easier.
A lot of our younger guys, obviously I'm the old man in the unit, and I remind them, I said, yeah, I got the same color hair as you, Jack. I remind them, I just go, hey, you are one flight physical away from not doing this anymore. Yeah. Do not take any of this for granted. It could be taken from you tomorrow. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And we all know that happens.
Yeah. I think you made a good point about leaving on your own terms. When I left the military, I would honestly say it was a decision, but it wasn't quite on terms with what or how I would have liked. There was some things that I felt like I had left undone. This time around, I think I'm a little more control of it. I'm sort of enjoying it. I know I'm on the back 3, not the back 9, but the back 3, and I'm trying to enjoy each day and realize that there's other things that I probably want to do with my time, and I will leave when I feel, right in my heart that it's like, okay, this is the time to do it. Hopefully it won't be because of, and I won't be forced out. It definitely will not be because of my lack of ability or proficiency. That one is not going to happen no matter what. If that was tomorrow, I'd walk out the door tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think it'll be better. And the other thing it's a little bit off topic per se, but I think financially, whatever it is that you need in retirement to keep yourself settled and satisfied, in other words, not having to worry about it, in my mind, as I think about it, to me, it's like that's a big component of it. I've reached my financial goals. I'm pretty certain I know what my standard of living will be and how I want to live. And I could do that and not worry about, oh my gosh, I can't spend, $500 this month because of X or whatever. It's sort of being in that world where you're always worried about your money and whether or not it's going to last and all of that stuff. I think that's a huge mental part of that comfort of just saying, yep, I'm good to go. I'm ready to walk.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of freedom that comes from that. We talked about law enforcement and public safety personnel aren't necessarily the best at marriages. The other thing they're not good at generally is their finances. So, you get to the end of your career and all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, now what?
Right.
So, luckily for me, I've always had an interest in all things finance and market related topics. So I put a lot of effort and energy into focusing that part of my life from an early age. But had I not, and had I been put in the position I'm in now without that resource, it would be very difficult. So for folks that, say I'll save later, I want to enjoy now. I encourage you to look at the situations you may not foresee. You might find yourself in a position where you're forced into medical retirement, and had you not been diligent with your finances, it could be a very challenging situation.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
So aside from just being able to enjoy your retirement and go and travel and do all the things with your grandkids you want to do, you got to make sure you're in a position where you're personally able to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So
I hear that a lot about, spend it now. I think you can do both. I mean, I tell my kids, I think I probably over prepped them on, this notion of saving money, but I'd like, are you paying your bills? Yep. Are you saving in your 401? Yep. Are you saving in your Roth? Yep. Then go have some fun. Go spend the money and do what you want to do with it and have fun with the rest of it. Not flagrantly blow it, but if you want a new bicycle because you're into mountain biking, go buy the damn bike. Just don't shortchange yourself if you're doing and covering all of those things. That to me is doing both. That's smart.
Even if the mountain bike is $7,000. That's what I always say.
That's oddly specific, Jack.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, Jack.
Was that my outdoor voice?
Yeah. Wait till your wife sees this episode.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, you talked about being in the last three, and I think we all know what you're referring to. You're talking about your career with LA County Fire and your job as a pilot there. Can you talk about kind of how that transition took place, leaving the military, getting hired by LA County? And I know there was some steps in between. Can you talk about those steps and how you wound up at LA County and what your experience has been there?
Yeah. So I was very lucky in my transition. My last unit that I was in the military, really, I took advantage of opportunities that were provided, and it really set me up incredibly well to sort of bypass some of the difficulties that I see with military guys today trying to get into my particular arena or the firefighting side. I field a lot of those questions and calls, and I have to give them some harsh realities. Unfortunately, one of them is total time for our organization. These guys are some of them coming out of the Army, 22, 23 years, 20 years, and they're sitting at maybe 3,000 hours. And which is a decent number for the Army.
Yeah.
But it's not enough for our organization. It's certainly enough to work in the field, but the complexity comes with this, and Tony talked briefly about it, but is the carding and what it takes to get carded or be cardable. So my first job that I had arranged was through a Army contact, flying a 212. And the only reason I was able to get that job is because I was cardable in that aircraft, and I had gotten the time needed in that aircraft as a pilot in command to be cardable. And therefore, I did the basic training, took a 135 ride in it, and got my card.
Can you, for folks that may not be familiar with that, what that means, can you talk about how you do that?
Yeah. So the carding process, to my knowledge, I have not looked at it, this year or anytime recently, but what I believe to be true is, there's two ways. Well, one, a card is usually associated with an employer. Mike Saisley can't just go, you know what, I want to get carded. It's got to be with a company that's going to hire you specifically to work, and you require that card and those qualifications. Two, if you need 50 hours pilot in command in the helicopter that you're going to be carded in, if you do not have a factory or a recognized school, and it's 25 hours pilot in command if you do have a school. Is that what you know to be true, Tony?
Yeah, that is true. And then if your carding is like ours, do you guys go through CAL FIRE, or does a forestry guy card you, or do you card your own people?
No, it depends on who the rep is, but we have a letter with the Forestry Service. That's usually who comes down and does ours. But the point of that is that card, you cannot work Forest Service contracts and fly on Fed fires or state fires for that matter, depending, without that card. And that card, and employers do not want to spend the money or the time to get you the flight hours in that particular machine that you would be working in. Well, nowadays it's obviously better. There's Chinooks that are coming into the market. There's Blackhawks that are coming into the market. But prior to, Army doesn't fly A-stars. They don't have 412s. They don't have Hueys anymore. I happen to be cardable in the Huey because I flew the Huey in flight school. Man, that paid off big with my Santa Barbara job. So automatically, an Apache guy is in big trouble. Kyle Warrior guy, you might get around that with a 407, depending on who you wanted to bribe and talk about. But these folks coming out of the military are already running into a hurdle where they can't get carded to enter the community to start working on the firefighting side of things. So usually they have to find some other job and sort of work their way through piece by piece. I got carded in the 212 because I had the background and the school and the hours in it. That gave me my first opportunity. I got carded in the UH-1 with Santa Barbara County Fire because I had flown the Huey in flight school and I had the time and I had it documented. I mean, I could show them that I had the qualifications in the aircraft. LA County, that was just no big deal. I'd already obviously had Hawk time, but I had 412 time. I mean, I had FSI 412 when I left the Army and I came to LA County. So my path was much, much easier. Did not have to work through that hurdle. And I explained that to the folks coming out of the military and those who want to get into the firefighting, side of things. And it's frustrating and it's a bummer to explain that to them. I almost didn't get that first job, even though I was cardable in the 212, because they didn't want to spend the 10 hours in a 206 to get the long line portion. Qualification.
That trips a lot of people up.
Oh my gosh. Well, but here's the reason why, and it's legitimate. These helicopter guys, I'm not going to put you all in the same basket, but a lot of guys, they're just on to the next best thing. They take and they take and they take, and it costs these operators a bunch of money, and they don't want to take a chance. They're like, forget it. I'm not spending, $10, $15, $20,000 on you, and you're going to bail on me halfway through the season to go on to the next job that's that much better. And unfortunately, that is a reality of the world on the firefighting side, away from the agencies, not what Tony and I are in, where, that's where people want to get to because of the security, because of the consistency, because of the, everything that's good about the job. They're working, towards that. And we see that. I just did final interviews last week. We did a hiring. Well, we went through a practical testing last year. So I see these young guys out there working, trying to get the commensurate level of experience and background, doing a variety of missions, not just the firefighting side, but to make themselves competitive in our process. Unfortunately, one, our experience requirements are, pretty high. And two, our practical examination is very thorough. And a lot of the pilots they're not really developing the diverse skill sets that we're looking for to start with. We don't have a training department, so training for us is complicated and expensive. So we need an individual that is very close in their skill set to our operation. And then, of course, you got to learn a very, very large geographical area. So it's tough. It's a big ask. And which is generally why we see older, more experienced pilots that are typically successful in our process.
What are your current, or what is LA County's current requirements for an entry-level pilot?
The minimums are 4,000 hours of pilot and command time in helicopters, and that is not CFI or instructor pilot time. We want that separated from it. So what I would refer to as operational hours, and that's what it says. 4,000 hours pilot and command, excluding instructor pilot time. 1,500 hours of mounted time. We have our own definition of mounted time, and that is above 4,000 feet PA, doing landings and takeoffs to unimproved landing areas, high gross weight, and adverse weather conditions, plus or minus. That's a little bit of a paraphrase. And then you need a commercial or an ATP. You need an instrument rating. And then at the time of hire, you need a California driver's license. So the process is pretty involved, but what ends up happening is you fill out a supplemental information packet, and in that, it allows you to select the number of hours that you have in various flight modes and or aircraft. For example, time above or time in aircraft above 12.5. Time in type 1, type 2, or type 3. How much night unaided do you have? How much MVG time do you have? Are you a CFI? Are you endorsed for MVG operations? How much fire time do you have? Do you have any rescue time? Do you have any overwater time? Et cetera, et cetera. Now, obviously, your average bear is not going to have everything on that list, but the idea would be finding someone who has a smattering, if you will, or a dabbling in each of the categories. You're awarded points, but you're also awarded a maximum number of points. So, for example, if you have 8,000 hours or more total time as pilot in command, you're only going to get X number of points. So the 16,000 hour pilot doesn't come in and go right to the top of the list, right? So it's a numerical value presented so that Mike Sagely can't go in there and go, I want that guy, and I want that guy, and I want that guy. It's got to be fair. It's got to be appropriate. And we have found that those that have the higher scores, meaning points in all of those various areas that we like to see, will generally do successful in the practical examination, and they will generally be successful in the flight training program. And quite frankly, right now, the thing that's kicking everybody's ass is NVG rescue work. Even pilots that have night vision goggle time.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a very complicated profile. It's very dynamic. It requires exceptional flight skills. It requires dynamic thinking and decision making and risk management. And then at the end of the day, you got to hold that aircraft dead freaking steady, or you're risking the poor soul who's sitting on the end of that cable. And if you can't do that, then you're not gonna stay around.
How diligent or how much detective work do you guys put into logbooks and looking at what they say their prior employment is? I know that hangs some people up, but do you guys really dig into that?
Thank you to our sponsor, Technisonic Communications. Technisonic Communications is a proud provider of the critical airborne communications equipment utilized every day on every mission. Law enforcement, EMS, forestry, federal and military operators all trust their communications to Technisonic. Visit TIL.ca to learn how Technisonic can support your mission communications.
Yes, we do. Pretty extensively. So in the beginning, when we do an initial look at their application, you do a cursory look to say, one, how long has this person been flying? Are these hours commensurate with the number of years that they've been flying? Two, the jobs that they've had, how long have they had these jobs? What types of jobs have they had? So when they're claiming they have, mountain time, or when they claim they have X, Y, and Z, it all kind of makes sense on their resume. The timeline sort of adds up. You do an initial forensics on it. The example would be a 4,500 hour pilot, one who barely meets the minimums, who is a Coast Guard pilot who says they have 1,700 hours of mountain time above 4,000 feet. Doesn't add up. Sorry.
Yeah.
So then if they are asked to an interview, when they come into the interview, they're expected to bring their logbooks or their documentation. And then we spend time going through it pretty thoroughly. Again, does it make sense? Is it complete? Does it support their resume? Does it support their job experience that they're saying that they have? And I tell you, this stuff is all over the place. And it does get a lot of people. I hear a lot, I never had to show my logbook at an interview. They just take my resume and whatever it says, they're good to go. And I'm like, well, okay, but we're buying you for life. We're going to put a lot of money into you, and you are representing the Los Angeles County, and we cannot afford to have a problem, with you. So
in a very important position.
Oh yeah.
A high risk, very important position.
Yes. Very demanding. Always, everybody's watching. It's always, so, and it's not like our guys don't make mistakes and we don't have our little hiccups here and there.
Of course.
But, it's a complex flight environment. It's 24 hours a day. And, we can't afford to have somebody less than the standards that we're looking for. And I will say over time, we have elevated those as much as humanly possible. And we think that we found a pretty good recipe overall. And we have rejected several people for lack of records or records that do not support what they claim. And that kind of pisses me off because you're taking a seat away from someone, because we can only interview so many. It's very, very expensive. So we set a reasonable number that we can handle logistically, and then we go from there. And if you fudge your records or you mislead on your records, and then you come in for the interview and we see it and we ask you or say, sorry, no, thank you. You've potentially screwed somebody else. It's not cool.
Yeah. It's not. I mean, cool. Do all of your pilots, do they fly both aircraft, or do you have some that fly one and not the other one?
Yes, they fly both aircraft, and we typically will keep them in the 412 for not a long period of time. It depends, just because that aircraft is more difficult and more delicate and more finicky, and it's a manual flying helicopter. You got to wiggle that thing, and so we feel like it develops their flight skills very well. Hawk guys tend to have a problem with 412 because they just do. One, it's underpowered, and two, it doesn't have a mixing unit. So you got to fly the thing like an old school helicopter, right?
Yeah.
Selective left pedal. I mean, you got to mix. You got to do the mixing yourself. So that aircraft is a challenge for some people, especially at night. We want them to, get to a certain level. We have been pretty fortunate lately in that we have guys that are already Hawk qualified or have some background in the Hawk because it's becoming so prevalent in the community or in the helicopter world, which is good for us in the long run. We still send them to school, though. We still send them to FSI in both aircraft once they've completed training. So that's the icing on the cake, if you will. Before we invest that money in them, we want to make sure that they're going to make it through the training program as well as probation. And it's a good extensive program. I'm pretty happy with it. We've had pretty good results. Well, we've had very good results overall. We're continuing to refine it. But so far so good.
So both your aircraft, are they all tanked aircraft, or do you run any buckets at all?
Yes, all tank.
All tank, okay.
All tank aircraft. Yeah.
Gotcha.
You talked a little bit about the two aircraft that you guys are flying. Can you talk about the agency as a whole? You talked about it being a big county, but if you have a rough idea of the square mileage of the county, and then talk about a little bit about the topography and the fuels that you're dealing with as it pertains to the firefighting.
That is the other unique part about it. We have 52 miles of shoreline. We go all the way to Catalina, 22 miles, 23 miles out over the ocean. So we do a lot of shoreline rescue. We train blue water. We've got blue water swimmers. We haven't had any real open ocean rescues. We have landed on ships. We have hoisted off of cruise liners for, patients that are in distress. And we go all the way out to Edwards. I mean, the county's huge. I think it's a little under 4,000 square miles, and it's obviously high desert. It goes from sea level to 10,000 feet, which is the height of Baldy. There's several 8,000 foot peaks. It's about a little under 11 million in population. It's obviously a very large recreation area. So people are out hiking, biking, motorcycling, kiting, surfing, you name it, they do it. So we put up 3 aircraft 24 hours a day. And then we augment during fire season. And we have 3 jurisdictional areas. We call them north, east, and west. So 1 aircraft per, and that is for response times. And they're all set up multi-mission. Typically, there's a Hawk on North County and West County. They have the highest elevations and mountains. For the rescue side of things, their leg lengths are typically longer, so the speed is good for response time. And they are all set up with multi-mission, meaning they all can do the same, right? So we have 2 paramedics on board, 1 pilot, 2 paramedics. And we meet, it's called Advanced Life Support Rescue, so ALS with paramedic. And we have the hoist, obviously. So we do the technical rescue side of things. It's kind of a jack of all trades. Aircraft got a lot of gear on it, and unfortunately, they keep wanting to put more on it because we have to meet the Department of Health Services standards for advanced life support care, because on scene there may be paramedics, but we're going to transfer. You got to transfer equal care or higher. And so we do a lot of remote work, a lot of remote landings in the desert, in the mountains, open fields, 1 skids, tow-ins, the hoist, the landing on the highways, landing on freeways, municipal parks, you name it, we're working it, because the trauma center system is set up that there's for example, there's really a pediatric, which is children's. Northridge is the same, but the trauma hospital system is pretty spread out throughout the county. And because of the traffic and because of the distances and wanting to hit that response time and that golden hour from the time the accident happens to the time you get them in the hospital, they use a helicopter extensively. You cannot get them there by ground generally in the time frame that you're looking for. So the preponderance of our work is EMS and transport, trauma transport. Next is probably close, but the next 2 would be, firefighting and rescue. We do a lot of hoist rescues, hoist rescues. We do a lot of training. We train the SOAR units. We have a tower on our facility where we do a lot of training with the crew members as well as units. SOAR units can come there anytime they want and train with us. We got some really sharp, really experienced, very capable crew members that are really good with that hoist. I tell you what, it's all I got to do is hold that damn helicopter steady, and they do all the crazy work. But I can make or break them by not doing my job. But my job is pretty defined. It's pretty narrow when it comes to. I mean, not so much the decision making, the setup, and into the hoist itself. That is definitely risk management and good ADM to set all that up. But when it comes down to it, and you're sitting over the victim, there's really only one thing, and that's got to be locked on, dead, locked on, and then everything goes well usually from there.
Absolutely.
Compare that to the dynamic environment that you find yourself in fighting fires.
So we're kind of set up really realistically for initial attack. We're not real big on the extended attack side of things because we don't have the personnel to just go and go and go. So, and that is our game. We get our aircraft there fast, we hit it hard, and hopefully we keep those fires really small. In about 48 hours, we're kind of cooked. So we really look for that first burn period, that first 24 hours. And because we're a contract county to the state and we have structure responsibility in the forest, in the Angeles forest, when it goes second burn period or goes extended, unless it's LRA, which is local response area, versus SRA, state response, FRA being federal response, we generally get kicked off or dropped, with the exception of either the need for rescue or night firefighting capability. So generally we roll back and then we end up starting, just a lot of times fighting fire at night. The Woolsey fire was an example that is a little bit of a novelty in that it was pretty much all local. So I started flying at about 3:15 in the afternoon on that fire, 3:10, 3:15. I landed at 10 o'clock that night, swapped out. New pilot went in. He flew all night till about 6. I took the bird at 6 a.m. and went back out for the day. So I got a little rest in there, obviously. So we have to start working and focusing on work rest cycles when we know we're going to go extended. Kind of start worrying about maintenance. We bring in maintenance folks. We start looking at hours for scheduled maintenance, things that need to be done to keep the aircraft running nonstop. And then eventually, when enough resources come from around the country or within the state, depending on the size of the fire, we generally start pulling back and we go back into our air squad / initial attack responsibilities. It's generally how it goes.
Do you have your own hell attack crews? And if you do, how many are on each airframe?
Yeah, we do. We have 2, actually, Camp 8, Camp 9. They're the fly crews. There are some others that are actually trained for fly, but when it comes to just sort of a normal manning cycle, we have the 2 crews. We generally fill every seat on the Hawk, which would be 11 usually. And yeah, that's another aspect to our firefighting that is a little bit unique in that you take that crew to the fire and you got to put them on or very near to the fire on a safe piece of terrain in general. And then you usually go to work right away with them as they start working. That's the purpose of that helicopter, is there to work with them and to protect them, essentially.
They're calling in your drops?
They are in support of, if they've got an area where they can work, where they don't really feel like they need support, then barring any other guidance from anyone on the ground, in the IC or ops, we will start working. And my pet peeve on this stuff, is initial attack is its own little world, right? You can drop water on fire, but you got to drop water in the right place and you got to be accurate with it. And if you are, then you're going to be successful. It's easy to want to go and just go to the red and put water on it, and get the money shot, as I call it. But the reality of it is you might not be doing the best for the fire. That first 10 or 15 minutes is very critical. That's where you win or lose the game, unless it's so wind driven that there's nothing you can do to stop it. So there's some simple concepts you start with. It's anchor and flank, and keep it narrow. And if you can do that, and you can do it rapidly with a couple of aircraft, you could probably be in pretty good shape. And then another aircraft, say a Type 2 might come in. And then that's typically, if I'm in a Hawk and I put the crew on the ground, if the fuel is not real heavy, I'll put a 412 with them and put it right in front of them, literally right on top of them, and start to get that thing going. And most of our fuels, you had asked that question, John, about our fuels, so a lot of our areas that are very active, they've burned and they've regrown, and they've burned and they've regrown. We've got some areas that haven't burned at all. Topanga area over there is, there's some heavy stuff over there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's that heavy brush that gets very dry, that you get any wind on it, and it is volatile and it moves fast, and it's tough. It's tough to put out once it gets going hard. You got to really get a lot of water on it, and you got to get the dozers in there to start cutting some good breaks. And you got to, there's times people don't understand this, but sometimes you got to let the fire burn. You got to let it burn out of a bowl. You got to let it get up to the top, and you got to hit it at the ridge. And that's where you're going to be successful with it. Some people don't like to see that. Like, why are those aircraft dropping on that? You're not going to do anything. You also have to understand that your aircraft, what you can do with your aircraft and how effective it will be with the amount of water that you have. The Hawk is obviously better than the 412. A lot more water. It's going to be a lot more effective, but it does have its limitations. It just does. So the fast moving grass generally tends to be fairly easy, to deal with. But our success revolves around getting a number of aircraft there very quickly and operating aggressively and accurately and tactically smart is what I would call it. That is a big component to it. We will man a Helco later on in the season. Our Helco has a chief officer in it. We run a little different model than what you would typically, those who know, when you hear the term Helco, which is helicopter coordinator, it's part of aerial supervision. Air attack is the boss. He sits up there in the airplane and they basically control the aviation assets, but the Helco they usually allow the Helco to run helicopters, especially since we're there before air attack gets there anyways. Start developing strategy with the aircraft, but the chief officer is there to talk with the ground, with IC and ops, and start developing a much bigger and strategic plan based on fire behavior, where it's going to go, where it's going to be in the next 30 minutes. Structured protection, is that an issue or not? Start moving units around, getting dozers in places where they can start cutting line out ahead of the fire, especially once it gets established. So they're basically the commander from the air, if you will. That we have a unique perspective in the air, so we can give a lot of intel to the ground. And then the pilot, let's just say it's me, for example, and I'm flying with the chief officer. I'm essentially acting as a flying ATC. I'm watching the routes. I'm figuring out where the aircraft are coming from, where they're dipping at, what their routes in and outs are going to be, whether we're going to make any control points, where I think the priorities are for dropping unless I'm being told or asked where. I'll make my own decisions on where I want to put helicopters, where I think they will be effective. So doing what a Helco does, which is to kind of oversee and make sure that the air assets are working safely. It's a safety management tool, really, is what it comes down to. It's too busy to put 10 aircraft collapsing on a 5-acre fire on initial attack without having the model that we have, which is essentially a 2-person rather than one. Tony knows this, one Helco in the left seat doing everything. They've tried it. It does not work in our county. You might have a superhuman out there. I don't care who you are, and I know some of the best. I think I know some of the best aerial supervisors in the country, and they've said, "Man, this is pretty tough." Probably could do it with some training, but these are guys that have years and years and years of experience, and they're top dogs.
Right. We usually have a good fire pilot, and then we put a ATGS next to him and let the ATGS run the show for the Helco side and let the pilot fly the aircraft. And for us, that works out a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. We've developed that over time. Pretty good model for the most part. It may change. This year we haven't kind of seen how things are. There's some things in flux right now that are changing a little bit. We send our guys to the Cal Fire Helco course. I've been to air attack school. Some of us have been to air attack school. But we try and get guys, knowledgeable of how that's supposed to work. First on scene is supposed to act in that capacity anyways.
Yeah.
Until they're relieved. Generally, the fires are in relatively predictable areas based on where most people are, based on where the recreation is, based on where but the county's huge, and it's all dry. It gets dry. It gets windy.
Oh yeah.
Got really rugged terrain, makes it difficult to access by ground. So a lot of times the air becomes the show. Yeah, I can't think of a better, place to have spent my career now. This will be my 17th season.
Wow.
Fire season.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to spend 7 fire seasons working with the U.S. Forest Service out of the San Bernardino National Forest. and you brought up the Angeles National Forest, and that's almost a trigger for me because anytime I got assigned to go to a fire in the Angeles National Forest, I knew I was going to be climbing on almost all fours up some steep hillside and falling down and sliding down on the way back. It was some of the steepest terrain that I've ever seen. You talk about these peaks. It's not a gentle slope that goes up to the peak. It's this rocky, chaparral-filled hillside that also has heavy timber at the top. So you've got, the really diverse set of fuels and really extreme fire behavior as a result of just the topography. And then you add wind to that, and it's a whole different ballgame.
Thanks to our sponsor, Garmin. From flight displays with wire aware power line alerting to autopilots with hover assist, Garmin avionics solutions give helicopter pilots the safety of flight tools they need to fly with total confidence. Find out more at garmin.com/helicopters.
Yes. No, I've heard, I haven't checked this literally, but I think the Angeles Forest is, the mountain range there is kind of up there in some of the steepest ranges in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe not the tallest, tallest, biggest, broadest, longest. But in terms of their aspect ratio and steepness, I think they're right up there. And it's that gnarly granite, stuff, and man, it chews up engines.
I've rolled like a tumbleweed down plenty of hillsides in the Angeles National Forest.
Hey, do you have video? Do you have some video of that? I want to see it.
I'd like to see that.
Luckily, that was prior. But man, it's been really cool to go through your career and what you guys are doing at LA County. You guys' mission profile and mission sets at LA County is huge. It's neat to sit here and talk with you with these folks. The last thing I'd like to kind of touch on, given your really broad experience that you've got in this, long, happy career that you've had. Again, going back to the folks that are kind of new to aviation, or maybe they're wanting to get in aviation, what advice do you have for those folks?
Well, at this point, from what I've seen, I think the key to success in the longer scheme of things is where you start your training at. And I'm pretty much convinced at this point that the military is probably the best route. It's a difficult route. It's a time-consuming route, and I say that on the helicopter side. I probably a little on the fence when it comes to the airplane side because the industry is just wide open. I mean, it is just moving like nobody's business. And if you go to a professional school and you invest and follow the program, I mean, they're maybe making some adjustments on ATPs now, airline transport pilot licenses coming out of these schools, call them limited, if you will, to where you can get in the right seat of a commuter and start, building hours and building time as an SIC or a FO. I don't know what they're calling it. I'm not on the airline side of things, but you run into this difficulty. Helicopter training is incredibly expensive. And then you're doing it at a Robinson 99% of the time. And now you get this great experience. It's I know a Robinson is a difficult aircraft to fly and it's power limited and all those great things. And I'm sure it makes you a good pilot in that regard, but it doesn't give you enough experience to sort of move into the jobs where you have working helicopters. Turbine time, for example, even in singles, whether it's a 407 or an A-Star or things of that nature. And so getting that first job, I think from what I hear and what I can gather, is very difficult. I can't fully relate to that experience because I didn't train through the civil side and come through that way, obviously. So it's like the chicken and the egg kind of thing. You can't get the experience without getting the job. You can't get the job because you don't have the experience.
Right.
But setting that aside, I ran into several young individuals at HAI and I was pretty impressed with them. And I kind of made a joke to this one kid, she was a sharp kid and they were asking all the right questions, but he had this long curly hair, this young kid and all that. And I said, yeah, you're going to have to get a haircut. And I say that jokingly, but I also say that seriously because the name and the recognition that you create for yourself is really what is going to make it for you, in my opinion. You may not have the experience, but if you present yourself and you demonstrate, I think you'll gain the confidence of, right? So in other words, you're looking for that job or you're looking for that break, but you've got to convince somebody who's going to put a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment in your hand and ask you to go out and act on your own. And I'm sorry to say, but when you come in and you look like you walked out of a homeless encampment, it's probably not going to go, so well. Now, I'm not saying you have to be dressed right, suit and tie, high and tight, and all that other piece of it, although that doesn't necessarily reflect badly in a professional world. But I am saying that you have to consider that in the way you present yourself, the way you speak, the way you articulate, and then convincing that individual that you're bringing value to their operation. And sometimes you just gotta be bold, and you gotta walk up and find that opportunity. If your resume is not this, you've been flying for a relatively short period of time and you don't have this phenomenal resume, you're gonna have to sell yourself and be confident enough to go in and say, sir, this is me. This is what I have so far to date, but here's why, I want to work for your company, or here's what I'd like to do. Here's what I'm offering you. And commit to it and be committed to that individual. Loyalty. Think about that for a second. You got this one helicopter, and you're one broken airplane away from bankruptcy, and you're going to hand it over to somebody. Right. So I'm a big believer in that, who you are and what you're bringing versus what you have on paper to say. And aviation is that weird thing, right? We go, oh, this guy's got 10,000 hours. Okay, so what? He might be 10,000 hours of bad stuff. Mm-hmm. Or he might be a 3,000 hour pilot that's shit hot, right? And you've got to cipher through that. How do you do that? Well, to me, if I talk to you long enough, I'm probably going to get through it pretty quick and figure out exactly where you are in that equation.
Yep.
And so I think, just to sort of recap that, is, you got to do the work, you got to have the licenses, you got to be, you got to be qualified to work and meet those minimums and so on and so forth. But I still think you can find your way if you present yourself professionally and appropriately, and you go out and you look for that. Mm-hmm. Go talk to the chief pilot, go talk to the DO, find that company that you want to work for, and go figure out what you got to do to get that first break.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I think an extension of what you're saying is reputation. That we're really in a small community, and your reputation is going to precede you in a good or a bad way. So if you're one to show up late all the time or not show up at all, you're guaranteed that's going to follow you. Versus what you're describing, someone who's punctual, professional, does a good job, great to get along with in the cockpit, all those things that precedes you as well. So
I've got a very small example of that. You give me 1 second. I know you probably want to get going, John, but my very first season, that contract, I had a job offer before the end of the season. And before my boss knew about it, who, oh yeah, by the way, is Jim Arbaugh now, ADC, he's a Region 5 HIP. So he's the one who gives me my karting check ride. I told him at the beginning of the contract that I wouldn't leave. I wouldn't leave until the contract was over. After the contract, didn't know what would happen at that point. So he didn't know this at the time, but I had the job offer and they wanted me to start before the end of the contract. And I told them that I couldn't do that and that I wouldn't do that. And when I told Jim that, when I said, hey, Jim, look, I got a job offer at the end of the season. This will be it for me. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity and all that. And he was like, shocked. He was so happy. He was so pleased. It's like, and I said, well, Jim, that's what I told you I was going to do.
Yeah.
So moral of the story is, your word is your word and your reputation is your reputation. You're the only one who should be ruining it if you're going to ruin it. And on the converse of that, this knucklehead that was doing the Chuchipedi contract left right in the middle, just said, I'm out of here. I'm going to go take this EMS job, and left him completely high and dry and hanging. they're losing thousands of dollars a day
Mm-hmm.
because you won't stick to your word.
Yep.
Well, in the community, you do that kind of stuff. You're screwing your brother. You're making a bad name for yourself, but you're screwing your bro too.
Right. Yep.
By doing that. And the community
Absolutely.
gets a bad reputation for that kind of stuff. Hence, I don't want to invest any money in you.
Right. Yep.
So back to my original point is you got to convince them why they should take a chance on you and spend the money.
Yep. Well, Jack and Tony, you guys have a lot of experience as well. Anything to throw in there as far as advice for young aviators or prospective aviators?
Yeah. I mean, Mike did bring up that a lot of guys come through and they have that military experience. I was fortunate. I got my experience, from the San Diego Sheriff's Department. We're still one of the few that will take a non-pilot. So you can come into our unit as a TFO, a tactical flight officer, and we pay for your lessons all the way up to commercial certificate. And then we send you to the factory schools, and then we bring you up through to where you're a full line pilot. And for me, it was the Sheriff's Department that got me the rescue side and my firefighting. And, I go out every day now with CAL FIRE crews as initial attack. And I'm very fortunate that I came up through that. But not everybody has that option. You still have people that, like Mike said, they're at a local flight school in their R-22 and they're trying to progress up to where you get those minimum hours. And at the end of the day, a lot of the ones that come up through that path, they all have said somebody took a chance on me, whether it be a one helicopter call when needed mom and pop operation that gave them their break to where they progressed up to larger helicopters. But you got to be persistent and you got to know what you want. If you're not persistent, you're never going to make it. And those are the stories I've heard on the civilian side. Mm-hmm. For us, we're fortunate. We train our own pilots, but I'm sure Jack will probably have some other examples for us.
Oh, that's this very similar to what I experienced. I feel really lucky, by the way, that it was internal training. All I needed was a minimum of a pilot, a fixed wing pilot with 100 hours PIC time to apply to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And they trained me. So that I can't relate to a lot of that and give good advice, to someone that's doing it at a much more difficult and much more expensive way. But I certainly agree with Mike that the military's always a good option, to get into that game and to build time and to have a good chunk of experience going into the civilian world, whether it be firefighting, law enforcement, long lining, logging, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Right? You have that chunk of experience that will get you in the door. So I feel really lucky in the way that we did it, but I admire the fact that so many pilots put in so much time, effort, and money to get to where they're going, and the dedication's amazing to me. And it's always, don't get me wrong, I had to work hard too, but in a different way. It wasn't the way that most have to fight through it. So
the key, Mike hit on it. Your reputation and your integrity is everything in this business.
Yep.
And it is. If you don't have that, things get really difficult.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I say that about the military, not just, it's not just because you go in the military that you're going to be this phenomenal, superstar pilot, but it is going to give you the foundation and you're going to mature in many other ways, not just as an aviator, but as a young person. If you go in young, and it's a foundational building block that I think has a lot of value as you walk out into the into the industry as a whole. Not necessarily into our world. It takes a while to even get further, and that's the one thing that a lot of military pilots I'm sensing don't want to do, is they don't want to kind of start over. They don't realize until they realize, man, maybe I do have to kind of sort of step back and, start over a little bit. But the other thing that I've seen and heard of is some of these professional schools. So in lieu of college, right, in lieu of spending all this money on tuition and a college degree, if you're going to go into debt or you're going to borrow money, why not do it for a professional school? And these schools then carry you through to the point where if you're a top performer, you're probably going to walk into a job opportunity, potentially. Right. Establish your reputation, your skill, all your qualifications and such. And I think, you'll be doing that. And I think that's really starting to become much more popular. Remember Silver State before it went under?
Yeah.
I mean, similar concept in that the schools are there, one-stop shop, hopefully good professional training, spend the money, invest, borrow it, do whatever you got to do. And then walk out into the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Well, man, you've imparted a lot of knowledge on us and our listeners, and I thank you for that. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and looking forward to meeting up at some point in person to have a beer and to hang out. Although we did get to hang out a little bit at HAI, but didn't get to have a beer, so we gotta do a redo for that.
Well, I'm going to be down in San Diego on Saturday briefly, and then I'm heading out to Mexico for a ride on Sunday morning. So that would have been if you're in, I don't know, are you live in San Diego, Jim?
I'm north of, I'm San Bernardino Mountains, like Arrowhead area.
Oh, okay. Oh, you live in Arrowhead?
Yeah.
Okay. We have,
and he has come down here and met us in San Diego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little complicated now, but my mother-in-law, we have a family vacation house up at Arrowhead.
I remember talking to you about that now. Yeah.
Just haven't been up there in a little while. So
it's getting to be lake time. We're getting excited.
Yes, indeed.
There you go. Here it comes.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. And again, look forward to seeing you guys in person here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Until then, we'll catch you later.
All right, guys.
Good. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Mike. It was great to have an extended conversation with you. You've done
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for everything you've done.
Yeah. We still didn't hit everything too,
No.
Never do.
Never do.
It's getting old though. So
we need 5-hour blocks, John. That's what we need. 5-hour blocks and no pee breaks.
Yeah. Pull the
I need one now.
Cord. Yeah.
All right. We'll see you guys.
See ya.
All right. Good talking to you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thanks to our sponsor, Garmin. From flight displays with Wire Aware Powerline alerting to autopilots with Hover Assist, Garmin Avionics Solutions give helicopter pilots the safety of flight tools they need to fly with total confidence. Find out more at garmin.com/helicopters. Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details. Thank you to our sponsor, Technisonic Communications. Technisonic Communications is a proud provider of the critical airborne communications equipment utilized every day on every mission. Law enforcement, EMS, forestry, federal and military operators all trust their communications to Technisonic. Visit TIL.ca to learn how Technisonic can support your mission communications.
As we wrap up this episode, it's clear that the journey of a pilot, aircrew member, maintainer, or public safety professional is marked by unique challenges that extend beyond the cockpit. Mike Sagely's insights remind us of the critical importance of a balanced family life and mental health as we navigate demanding careers in aviation. The pressures of those professions can take a toll, but with strong communication, understanding, and support from loved ones, it's possible to foster healthy relationships and maintain mental well-being. Prioritizing family dynamics and mental health is vital not just for personal fulfillment, but also for ensuring that we can perform at our best in our professional roles. By focusing on these aspects, we not only enrich our own lives, but also enhance our capacity to serve our communities effectively. Let us all strive to create that balance, recognizing that our greatest strength comes from the support of our families and the mental resilience we built along the way. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.